What if a routine flight turned into a moment of truth? What if an act of arrogance led to an earth-shattering revelation at 30,000 feet? Buckle up, because this isn't just another in-flight drama. This is a story of prejudice, survival, and an unexpected twist that left an entire plane in stunned silence. Stay with us and subscribe and tell us where you are tuning from. Let's dive back to the story because what happens next will shock you. The air inside Flight 472 was thick with the scent of coffee and the subtle hum of conversations. Passengers nestled into their seats, some lost in books, others dozing off, lulled by the steady drone of the engines. It was a routine flight from London to New York, expected to be uneventful. Then, chaos erupted in row 14. "Excuse me," I said, "bring me a fresh drink." A sharp, authoritative voice sliced through the cabin's calm. All eyes turned toward the commotion. A middle-aged woman, dressed in an elegant beige suit, her blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, glared at the flight attendant standing before her. The attendant, a tall black woman with graceful poise, remained composed. Her name tag read Amara. She had been with Royal Atlantic Airlines for nearly a decade, known for her impeccable service and patience. But tonight, patience was being tested. "Ma'am," Amara said in an even tone, "I kindly ask you to lower your voice. The drink you requested is the same one I just served you." The woman scoffed, her pale fingers gripping the edge of her tray table. "Are you calling me a liar?" She sneered, eyes narrowing. "I paid for this seat, and I expect to be treated with respect, not by someone like you." A hush fell over the section. Someone gasped. A businessman in the next row adjusted his tie, pretending to check his emails, while an elderly couple looked on with disapproving eyes. Amara stiffened but maintained her professionalism. "I'm here to ensure your comfort and safety, ma'am. If you have any concerns." Without warning, she lifted her half-filled cup and contents of Amara. Ice and liquid splattered across her uniform, soaking the crisp white shirt. A collective gasp spread through the plane like wildfire. Amara remained still, the ice cubes slipping down her sleeves, her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't the first time she had dealt with difficult passengers, but this was something else, an act of pure humiliation. Then the woman smirked, folding her arms. "That's how you serve a real lady." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then, as if a switch had flipped, murmurs of disbelief filled the cabin. Someone whispered, "Did she just?" while another muttered, "Unbelievable." A young man in the aisle seat shot up. "Hey, that's not okay!" But before anyone could react further, something happened that no one expected. Amara, still dripping with ice, slowly straightened her shoulders. A new fire burned in her dark eyes, not of anger, but of something far more unsettling. She smiled. Not a forced, professional smile, not the tight-lipped, restrained expression of someone used to swallowing their pride. No, this smile carried a weight that sent a chill down the spine of every witness. And then she spoke, her voice calm yet commanding. "Ma'am," she said, leaning in ever so slightly, "you might want to buckle your seatbelt." What happened next would change everything. Please, click the subscription button and help us grow this channel. You also share the link. For a few agonizing seconds, the only sound in the cabin was the steady hum of the engines. Passengers held their breath, their eyes darting between Amara and the woman who had just drenched her in ice-cold humiliation. The blonde woman, her name tag read Mrs. Evelyn Cartwright, crossed her arms with smug satisfaction. To her, this was nothing, just another servant put in her place. She had been raised in privilege, the kind that taught her people like Amara were meant to serve, not speak back. But Amara wasn't backing down. She wiped her sleeve slowly, her fingers steady. When she finally met Evelyn's gaze, there was no anger, only a quiet, unsettling resolve. "Ma'am, I strongly suggest you remain in your seat." Evelyn let out a dry laugh. "Or what? You'll have me removed?" She leaned forward. "You think people like you have any real power up here?" A murmur of discontent spread through the surrounding rows. A businessman shook his head. The elderly couple looked at each other in dismay. A deep voice cut through the tension. "She does." Everyone turned. Standing at the front of the section was the captain of the flight. A tall, silver-haired man with a presence that commanded attention, Captain Richard Langley had seen many things in his years of flying. But this This was different. His icy blue eyes locked onto Evelyn with the weight of authority. "Mrs. Cartwright," he said smoothly, though there was steel beneath his words, "I trust you're aware that assaulting a flight attendant is a federal offense." Evelyn's smirk faltered. "Assault? Oh, come now, Captain. It was just a little spill. No need to overreact." She flicked her manicured nails dismissively. Langley didn't move, but the muscle in his jaw tightened. "Mrs. Cartwright, you are now considered a disruptive passenger. Under aviation law, I have the authority to have you restrained, removed, or even banned from future flights. Would you like to test me?" The color drained from Evelyn's face. She had expected passive compliance, not defiance backed by power. Passengers began whispering again. Some nodded in approval. A few even took out their phones, discreetly recording. Evelyn's lips parted as if to argue, but then something shifted in Amara's expression. Something almost imperceptible. A quiet dignity. A silent warning. Evelyn realized too late that she had miscalculated. Still, she wasn't one to surrender so easily. Straightening her blouse, she scoffed. "This is ridiculous. I'll be speaking to my lawyers about this nonsense." The captain remained unmoved. "You do that. In the meantime, I strongly advise you to comply. Because if you don't," he gestured toward the two burly security officers now making their way down the aisle, "they will ensure you do." Evelyn stiffened. Around her, the passengers watched with anticipation. Would she back down? Would she fight? And then, without warning, she did something no one expected. She reached into her purse. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Tension spiked. A few passengers instinctively ducked. The security officers tensed, ready to act. But what she pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was a document. A single sheet of paper, creased from years of careful preservation. Evelyn held it up with a trembling hand, and when Amara saw what it was, her entire body went rigid. Because printed on that paper, faded but unmistakable, was a name she recognized. Her own name. The paper trembled in Evelyn Cartwright's manicured hands as she stared at Amara, her smugness replaced by something far more unsettling, an emotion teetering between shock and desperation. The passengers, still on edge from the security officer's approach, strained to see what had just unfolded. The murmurs grew louder. The energy in the cabin had shifted from outrage to something even more electric, confusion laced with an eerie anticipation. Amara's heart pounded as she took a step closer. She knew that paper. She had seen its kind before. Swallowing, she reached out and gently took it from Evelyn's fingers. The moment her eyes scanned the faded typewritten text, her breath caught in her throat. It was an old birth record, and on it, clear as day, was her full name, Amara Obianuju Williams. She blinked, her mind racing. It wasn't possible. Her parents had told her she was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and had moved to the UK as a child. They had never spoken of any other history, never mentioned a connection to a stranger like Evelyn Cartwright. She glanced back at Evelyn, whose once arrogant face had twisted into something close to grief. "What is this?" Amara's voice was steady, but inside, a storm raged. Evelyn swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed as she tried to find the words. "It's proof." "Proof of what?" Evelyn sucked in a sharp breath. Her voice, which had been sharp and condescending just moments ago, was now thick with emotion. "Proof that you're my sister." The words crashed into Amara like turbulence hitting a plane mid-flight. The entire cabin collectively gasped. Amara staggered back. Her mind screamed at her to reject the claim outright. It was impossible, absurd. How could this woman, this entitled, cruel, racist woman, be connected to her by blood? Evelyn continued, voice trembling. "Our father, he had a child before me. Before he married my mother, he never spoke about it. But after he passed, I found the documents. I searched for years. I thought you were gone." Her voice broke. "But here you are." The passengers sat in stunned silence. Even the security officers, once ready to restrain Evelyn, now stood frozen, their hands hovering uselessly in the air. The elderly couple across the aisle whispered in shock. A young woman wiped away a tear. Someone muttered, "This is insane." Amara felt the cabin spinning around her. She had spent her entire life navigating the world as a black woman who had to fight for her place, especially in spaces like this, where people like Evelyn Cartwright wielded power without a second thought. And now? Now she was being told that one of those people was family? No. She refused to believe it. But the paper in her trembling hands said otherwise. The hum of the aircraft faded into the background as Amara stared at the document in her hands. The ink, though faded, felt heavy, as if each letter carried the weight of a past she had never known. Evelyn Cartwright, this woman was claiming to be her sister? It was absurd, it was impossible. Amara's fingers tightened around the paper, her pulse hammering. "I don't believe you," she said, her voice quiet but sharp. Evelyn exhaled shakily. "I didn't expect you to," she admitted, "but I'm telling you the truth." Passengers leaned in, completely enthralled. Some had started recording. The elderly couple exchanged knowing glances, as if witnessing a history they had seen before. Captain Langley cleared his throat, his voice measured. "Mrs. Cartwright, I suggest you explain yourself, quickly." Evelyn nodded, swallowing her pride. "My father, Charles Cartwright, was stationed in Lagos in the 1980s. He met your mother there. They had a relationship, but when his assignment ended, he left. He didn't know she was pregnant. By the time he found out, it was too late. She had already left Nigeria with you. He tried to find you, but my mother made sure he never did." Evelyn's voice cracked. "I only found out after he died." Amara shook her head. "No, my father." She hesitated. The truth was, she had never known much about him. Her mother had always been vague, refusing to talk about the past. Evelyn's eyes softened. "I have more than just that document. I have letters, photos, DNA test results." She exhaled. "You're my sister, Amara." The name rolled off Evelyn's tongue awkwardly, like a foreign word she wasn't used to saying. A lump formed in Amara's throat. Everything in her wanted to deny it, to shove the paper back into Evelyn's hands, to reject this new reality. But she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her chest. What if it was true? What if her entire life had been built on half-truths and missing pieces? She looked at Evelyn, the woman who had humiliated her just minutes ago. And yet, beneath the arrogance, beneath the privilege, there was something else in her expression now. Fear. Desperation. Hope. Amara opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say another word, the plane suddenly jolted. A sharp dip. Gasps filled the cabin. A few passengers screamed as overhead bins rattled. The fasten seatbelt sign blinked on. "This is your captain speaking." Langley's voice came over the intercom, tight with urgency. "We're experiencing unexpected turbulence. Everyone, take your seats and fasten your seatbelts immediately." The plane lurched again, harder this time. Drinks spilled, phones slid from tray tables, a baby started wailing. And just like that, the revelation of Amara's past was shoved aside. Now, something far more urgent loomed, something that threatened everyone on board. The aircraft lurched violently, sending a jolt of panic through the cabin. Passengers clutched their armrests, eyes wide with fear. Overhead compartments rattled, and a food tray clattered to the floor with a metallic clang. Amara instinctively grabbed onto the nearest seat for support, her breath hitching. Evelyn, for all her arrogance, looked genuinely terrified now, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This can't be happening," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaotic murmurs. Amara forced herself into action. Fear could wait. Duty came first. She turned to the nearest row of passengers. "Stay calm. Keep your seatbelts fastened," she instructed, her professional training kicking in despite the emotional storm raging inside her. The intercom crackled to life again. Captain Langley's voice was grim but steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing severe turbulence. I need everyone to remain seated. Cabin crew, secure the cabin immediately." A sharp tilt to the left sent a fresh wave of gasps through the plane. The elderly couple across the aisle clung to each other. A mother held her child close, whispering reassurances. A businessman in first class wiped sweat from his brow. For the first time in her career, Amara felt the weight of helplessness. But there was no time for fear. She moved quickly, checking seatbelts, helping a young girl retrieve her fallen glasses. Even as the aircraft shuddered, she forced herself to focus. Evelyn's voice cut through the tension. "What's happening? Are we crashing?" Amara spun toward her. "No," she said firmly, even though she wasn't entirely sure. "Just turbulence. We'll get through this." But Evelyn was unraveling. The composed, haughty woman from earlier was gone. In her place was someone raw, vulnerable. And then the worst happened. The oxygen masks deployed. A collective gasp filled the cabin. Amara's stomach twisted. "No, no, no. Tighten your seatbelts," she shouted over the growing panic. Put on your oxygen masks. Cover your noses and mouths. Breathe slowly. The security officers, once poised to remove Evelyn, were now gripping their seats for dear life. The tension between her and Amara had evaporated, replaced by something greater: survival. Evelyn's eyes darted around in terror. Amara. But before she could finish, the plane jerked downward. Screams erupted, trays flew, bags tumbled from overhead compartments. The sense of weightlessness was terrifying, as if the plane itself had lost control. For a brief, terrifying moment, Amara thought, "This is it." Then, clarity. The descent slowed, the violent shaking eased, and just as suddenly as it began, the turbulence stopped. The plane stabilized. Silence settled over the cabin, broken only by shaky breaths and muffled sobs. Captain Langley's voice returned, tired but calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've cleared the turbulence. I apologize for the scare. We'll be landing shortly." A collective exhale rippled through the passengers. Relief, exhaustion, disbelief. Amara pulled off her oxygen mask, hands still trembling. Evelyn stared at her, her face pale. "You," she choked out, her voice raw. "You saved me." Amara held her gaze. Minutes ago, Evelyn had been her enemy, an arrogant, privileged woman who had humiliated her. But in those few terrifying moments, when death had felt inches away, none of that had mattered. They were just two people, two sisters, breathing the same air, surviving the same storm. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes, and for the first time she lowered her head, not in arrogance, but in shame. She swallowed hard. "I was wrong about you." Amara's lips parted, but she couldn't find the words. The flight attendants moved down the aisles, comforting passengers, restoring order. As the plane made its final approach, Evelyn hesitated before speaking again. "Please, when we land, will you talk to me?" Amara looked at her, really looked at her. The woman who had once been a stranger, a tormentor. And now she was something else. The past couldn't be erased, the pain couldn't be undone, but maybe, just maybe, something new could begin. She exhaled and nodded. Evelyn broke down in silent sobs, and as the wheels touched the ground, Amara knew this flight had changed everything, forever. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more gripping real-life stories. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, because sometimes the most unexpected stories are the ones that need to be heard. See you in the next one.